Are the French revolting again? Hey, why aren't the Germans or the British as revolting as the French? These and other questions will be answered right after this. I'm Professor Jerome Arkenberg, and I've been teaching a wide variety of history courses at colleges across this country for the past 30 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about when and where the 1830 revolutions began, other than in 1830, of course. When and where these revolutions succeeded, and when and where these revolutions failed, which simply postponed the reckoning due, divine right, absolutism. At the end, I'll have the wrap-up quote on this video. But first, make sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, and that little bell thingy, so I can continue to bring you more great videos just like this one. After the death of Louis XVIII in 1824, his brother, Charles X, otherwise known as King Chuck, took no time in trying to restore divine right absolutism to what it had been before the French Revolution of 1789, so that sacrilege, including any criticism of the king, was criminalized. Freedom of the press was severely curtailed and heavily censored. The National Guard was dissolved. Control of the public schools was restored to the Catholic Church, and the Jesuits were welcomed back. And reparations of 1 billion francs were decreed to the nobility, the émigrés who had lost their property during the Revolution and had now returned from exile. Then, in July of 1830, King Chuck X revoked the Grand Charter given by Louis XVIII, effectively France's constitution, and Paris rose in revolt. After 3 days of fighting on barricades, Charles X and his family fled to London, and the Marquis de Lafayette, yes, that Marquis de Lafayette, who had served as a general in the American Revolution and who had also played a key role in the original French Revolution, put the king's cousin, Louis Philippe, on the throne as a compromise candidate. Compromise because you had a difference between those who wanted to continue a monarchy and those who wanted to have simply a republic. Unfortunately, for those who wanted a republic, fears of a republic would surely bring about another war with Britain, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. But if they appointed a king, it would not. And Louis Philippe, well, he had actually fought for the revolution in the revolutionary armies, as had his father. He was at heart a revolutionary, a liberal constitutionalist. And that is the government that he had pledged to put in place. And yet, he's also royalty. He is the cousin of Charles X. Now, upon news of the rising in Paris, the rest of Europe rose in revolt against the repression of the Holy Alliance, sparking fears amongst kings and emperors, princes and premiers of a new round of revolution and revolutionary wars. After all, it had been only 15 years since Napoleon had been defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and less than 10 years since Napoleon himself had died. The whole era of revolutionary France, was in the living memory of much of Europe. In Brussels, in Holland, Dutch efforts to eradicate the Flemish and French language and impose Protestant Calvinism throughout the country led to resistance in Catholic Belgium, half of which spoke Flemish, the other half of which spoke French. And news of the July Revolution sparked a rebellion. After a series of Dutch campaigns, a lengthy siege of Antwerp, and French intervention with troops sent by Louis Philippe, the great powers, Russia, Austria, Prussia, France, and Great Britain, approved Belgian independence from Holland on condition that it have a monarch and that it be perpetually neutral, which lasted until World War I. Of course, Belgium would have to have a king, because a country without a king was just inconceivable, especially to the Holy Alliance, plus also Britain and France. So who would this be? This wound up as Leopold of Saxe-Coburg. You see him here. He is the widower of Princess Caroline of Great Britain. And Princess Caroline would have taken the throne and become Queen Caroline after the death of her father, George IV. That is, if she had not died in childbirth in 1819. So Leopold, who was actually quite popular with the British, well, he got essentially a consolation prize. He would never become King of Britain, but he at least becomes King of Belgium, and that's better than just being a prince. In Poland, when news came of the July Revolution, riots in Warsaw against the Russians turned into a major revolt. And though the Poles were initially victorious in several battles, by the end of 1831, large Russian armies crushed the revolt. Poland was stripped of its status as an independent, quote-unquote, kingdom, Congress Poland, and became simply another province of the Russian Empire, and subjected to the full rigor of the Russian police state. In Italy, there were risings as well, but they were suppressed by the Austrians. And in 1832, Pope Gregory XVI, who took the throne of St. Peter in 1831 and reigned until 1846, prohibited every Catholic worldwide from supporting freedom of the press, freedom of religion, democracy, or any type of liberalism, including constitutions, on pain of excommunication. This had a very serious effect on Catholics who lived in liberal countries, Britain, but especially North and South America, the Latin American countries, and really the United States. And Catholics hence became a matter of suspicion by the Protestant majority in America. The Catholics, if a Catholic politician ever took power, as a governor, senator, or even, goodness gracious, president, they would get rid of the Constitution, get rid of American democracy, and turn it over to the Pope and make another dictatorship out of it. This lasted until the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960, and even to some extent to the present day. In Germany, there were minor risings in Dresden, Hanover, Brunswick, and Frankfurt, which were quickly put down. But a toast by 25,000 Germans to Lafayette, the Marquis de Lafayette, at the 1832 Hambach Festival, also known as the Taste of Hambach, drew the attention of the Austrian Chancellor, Karl von Metternich, who forced further repressions on the Germanic Confederation, including prohibitions and all constitutional reforms. In Britain, news of the July Revolution came as William IV, popularly known as Sailor Billy, because he spent almost his entire adult life in the Royal Navy, he succeeded his brother George on the throne, which was then immediately followed by the Reform Bill crisis. There are many ins and outs of this. What else is there? But this was a near revolution, which showed eventually that a simple act of Parliament passed by the House of Commons could change the British Constitution without approval by the House of Lords. And in Spain, the death of Ferdinand VII in 1833 brought upheaval when Ferdy's brother, Don Carlos, as seen here, rejected the accession of his liberal niece, Isabella II, also seen here, and began a civil war, the Carlista Wars, named after himself, of course, which would plague Spain for the rest of the century. Yes, this picture, this painting, Liberty Leading the People, is very often confused as being illustrative of the original French Revolution, which it is not. It was painted about the 1830 Revolution. And speaking of which, here is the wrap-up quote. All Paris was now an open insurrection. The paving stones were torn up and carried to the upper rooms of the houses to be hurled on the heads of the troops. Bullets were cast by the women in the shops and at the doors. Those who had weapons of any kind stood ready to use them. Those who had not disposed themselves to employ such humble missiles as they could obtain, and to aid their brethren by their presence and acclamations in default of possessing the means of active cooperation. The citizens rushed into the Tuileries Palace as promptly as they had entered the Louvre, and the princely halls of the chateau, its rich dormitories, and the secret cabinets of royalty itself, were speedily filled with the profane crowds of the populace of Paris. The people were now in reality the sovereigns of France. King Charles X had, ere this, recalled the illegal ordinances and accepted the resignation of his ministers, but all too late. For while he was deliberating on the subject, the reign of the Bourbons had ended. The scepter had passed away from their hands. A revolution, as glorious in its consequences as in its achievement, had been accomplished in the short space of 3 days, and France was free. U.S. Ambassador to France, Caleb Cushing, 1830. Let me know what you think of this quote in the comments section below. And also, what you liked about this video, and what other historical topics or subjects you'd like to see in future videos. Be sure to click like, share, and especially subscribe, as it will help me bring you more great videos. And click on that little bell thingy, so you'll know when the next History Waits for No One video is posted. If you want to know more, there are recommended studies on this topic in the description below, along with other ways to connect with me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the past.